This is Handmade Christmas Gifts by Dr. Emmett Brown, read to you by the author. Summary: Hatsume shows up at the Class 2A dorms to drop off Christmas presents and sticks around to watch Midoriya open his gifts. Ashido thinks there might be something going on between them. Midoriya covered a yawn with his hand as he shuffled out of the elevator into the lobby. It was Christmas Eve, and after classes in the morning, the dorm Christmas party would be held later that night before they all went home for the holiday tomorrow. Midoriya smiled as the Christmas tree standing tall in the corner of the lobby came into view. The 3-meter-tall tree was decked out in gold and silver balls, ornaments made by the students, and had a huge star on top. Presents were piled up at the base of the tree, more than he remembered seeing when he went up to bed last night. He chuckled. Maybe Santa had made a visit. He made his way over to the kitchen to put the kettle on for tea, when he noticed someone sleeping on one of the couches in the lounge area. Or rather, they were sleeping half on the couch, half on the floor. The person's upper half was lying face down on the cushions, while their lower half was hanging off the edge, their knees on the floor. If Midoriya had to guess, he'd say the person had collapsed there out of pure exhaustion. Tea forgotten, he walked over to the couch and discovered a mop of pink hair topped with a pair of goggles resting on a pillow. "Hatsume?" he said quietly. Midoriya puzzled over what to do with her. She wasn't supposed to be here after all. She should have been at her own dorm. It was impossible to say how long she'd been there like that, but he knew she wasn't there when he went to bed last night at 2200. Should he wake her? The sound of the elevator doors opening drew his attention. Out walked Uraraka and Ashido, chatting with each other as they came towards him. Uraraka smiled at Midoriya when she saw him. "Hey, Duko," she called out. Midoriya held up a finger to his mouth. "Shh!" He pointed with his other hand at the couch. The girls quietly came around the side of the couch, curious to see what was going on. They blinked in surprise when they saw the sleeping girl. "What's Hatsume doing here?" Uraraka whispered to Midoriya. Midoriya shrugged. "Wait, you know who this is?" asked Ashido. Uraraka turned to her friend. "Yeah, you remember. The pink-haired girl with all the tech at the sports festivals. She teamed up with Deku, Tokiyami, and I at the cavalry battle last year." Midoriya nodded. "Yeah, and this year she and I were a team in the doubles table tennis tournament." Ashido's dark eyes widened as she remembered, and she pounded a fist into her other hand. "Oh yeah, she made that ping-pong ball cannon that no one could return." Midoriya nodded. "No idea why she's here, though, or how long she's been here." "She's in Class H, isn't she?" asked Uraraka. "Their dorm is all the way on the other side of campus." Midoriya nodded. "I doubt she spends many nights there, though. Mostly she spends all her time in the development studio. She even sleeps in there." Ashido narrowed her eyes at the green-haired boy. "How do you know that?" Midoriya shrugged again. "I go to see her for help with my costume from time to time." Uraraka stifled a giggle behind her hand. "Yeah, like once a week. More often if you can find an excuse." Midoriya raised an eyebrow quizzically. He was about to ask what Uraraka meant by that, when Hatsume's steady breathing broke rhythm, and she inhaled sharply as she woke up. She groaned and stood up on her knees, her back to the other students staring at her. "Shoot," she mumbled quietly as she looked out of the window and saw daylight. "Slept longer than I meant to. I need to get back to the studio." Uraraka cleared her throat, causing Hatsume to whip round in surprise. Her hands came up in some kind of aggressive posture, a screwdriver held in a reversed grip like a knife. "Good morning," Uraraka sang, waving a hand. Hatsume lowered her hands and put her screwdriver into her belt. "Oh, good morning, Midoriya." She turned and looked at the other girls, pointing first at Uraraka. "I don't remember your name." Her finger moved to point at Ashido. "I don't think we've ever met." Uraraka sighed and put a hand on her face. Ashido looked at her friend curiously. This obviously wasn't the first time they'd had this discussion. "I'm the floating one, remember? You made my arm bracers with the retractable cables." Hatsume's face lit up. "Right! Floaty girl with baby number 5004. I never forget a baby." "I'm Ashido Mina," Ashido piped up, not wanting to be left out. Hatsume smiled. "Nice to meet you. I probably won't remember that." Ashido pouted. Midoriya chuckled, shaking his head in amusement. "What are you doing here, Hatsume?" Hatsume turned to face him, and her face lit up. "Oh, I'm just playing Santa. I dropped off a few presents for my favorite hero course classmates." Uraraka looked puzzled. "How'd you get in? They locked the doors at night." "I said I was playing Santa," Hatsume said with a wink. "I came down the chimney." "There's no fireplace," Ashido pointed out. "Did you know the air ducts in the HVAC system are big enough that a person can climb through them? It's a serious security hazard if you ask me." She turned to Midoriya, and a smile bloomed on her face again. I was gonna just leave, but I hadn't slept in a few days, and the couch looked so comfy. So I took a power nap and slept longer than I meant to. But now I get to see you open your presents. She grabbed onto his arm with both of hers. Come on! Midoriya blushed as she pressed her generous chest against his elbow and allowed her to drag him over to the tree. She plopped down right next to him. Amused, Uraraka and Ashido followed them over to the pile of presents. Uraraka was surprised to find a gift from the mechanic for more than a few of her classmates, though none of them were labeled with their names. Running guy, exploding guy, hot and cold guy, music girl. Hey, there's one for me! The tag said Floaty Girl. Hatsume was handing a gift to Midoriya. Uh-huh, she said without turning her head. Ashido bounced up and down excitedly. Ooh, is there one for me? You don't use support items, Mina, said Uraraka. Ashido pouted. I could. Uraraka chuckled at her friend's antics and unwrapped the present. Sitting neatly inside the box were 2 spools of thin white cables. She lifted out a spool, marveling at the light weight. Hatsume looked over at her. Those are to replace the cables in your bracers. The material is just as strong as steel, with less than half the weight. It's also more dense, so I can make the cables thinner without losing strength, meaning they're longer because more can fit on the spool. Wow, what's it made of? Spider silk! Uraraka blinked in surprise at her. Ashido made a face and scooted away from the spool in Uraraka's hand. Hatsume shrugged, smiling, and handed Midoriya another gift. She leaned closer to them, their shoulders touching. Okay, not actual spider silk, but have you met that first-year student with all the arms and eyes? It's her silk. Wow, I didn't know she could spin silk, Uraraka replied. Thank you, Hatsume, and please thank Kumo-chan for me too. But Hatsume wasn't paying attention anymore, having turned back to face Midoriya as she placed a third gift in his lap. Ashido was staring at the pair as Midoriya unwrapped his present, a serious look of concentration on her face. She said as her hand came up to stroke her chin. Uraraka looked at her curiously. What is it? Ashido turned to her friend. You're okay with this? Uraraka blinked. With what? Ashido gestured at Midoriya as he opened his 4th gift. Hatsume was sitting so close to him she was practically in his lap. She's horning in on your man! Uraraka looked over at the pair. Hatsume fed Midoriya a piece of chocolate orange. Uraraka covered her mouth to hide a giggle. Good for him! She turned back to Ashido. Deku isn't my man. I got over that crush last year. What? Shouted Ashido. The couple across from her turned in her direction curiously, as if they just noticed she was there for the first time. Ashido gave them an embarrassed smile and waved them off. They turned back to each other and continued to discuss Midoriya's gifts. Uraraka shrugged. It was getting in the way of me becoming the kind of hero I wanted to be, so I put those feelings aside, and eventually they went away. Ashido gaped at her. But true love! Uraraka shook her head. Nah, just a crush, nothing more. The sound of the elevator doors opening behind them drew the girls' attention. Out walked Bakugo and Kirishima, who made their way towards the kitchen. Uraraka smiled. Oi, Bakugo! She called out. When he turned to her, she held up a fist, putting her other hand on her bicep. You ready for training today? I came up with a new move last night, and I know I'm going to take you down. Bakugo grinned widely at the challenge, though his eyes stayed hard as steel. In your dreams, round face, he retorted, returning her gesture. Ashido watched this exchange in amazement. She looked over at Kirishima, who just shrugged. She shook her head. Okay, girlie, we need to have a girls' night when we get back after Christmas, and you need to spill your guts. Uraraka looked over at her. What? Why? What are you talking about? Having opened all of her gifts for him, Midoriya walked Hatsume to the door. Are you going to be late for class? He asked. Psh! Hatsume scoffed, waving it off his concern. I'm like 4 projects ahead of Power Loader's syllabus for the year, and that's with having made all these gifts. I'm not going to get into trouble. She looked at him with her golden eyes. Midoriya felt that she might have been using her quirk to stare deep into him. I'm glad you like your gifts, Midoriya. Midoriya put a hand behind his head. Yeah, they're all really great. I'm sorry I didn't get you anything. Money's been a little tight. I didn't even get my mom anything this year. It's okay, she replied. You don't have to get me anything. Midoriya shook his head. No, I want to. I'll stop by the studio after Christmas. Maybe we can go out to dinner or something. Hatsume smiled widely. I'd like that. They reached the door. Midoriya stood by as Hatsume pulled on her boots and laced them up. She stood but didn't say anything, hesitating. Her eyes wandered around the room, now unable to meet his. Midoriya's mind raced as he tried to think of something to say. He looked up and paused as he saw something hanging from the ceiling. When did they put that up there? He wondered aloud. Hatsume followed his gaze and saw a sprig of mistletoe hanging above the geikan. The teens looked at each other, then Hatsume leaned in close and kissed Midoriya on the cheek. She stepped back, blushing and smiling like a cat who caught the canary. Merry Christmas, Midoriya, she said softly. Midoriya's face was beet red, but he wore a wide smile. He now knew of a gift that he could give her he was pretty sure she'd like. He stepped in closer, placed his hands on her waist, and gently kissed her on the lips. Hatsume stiffened in surprise at first, but quickly calmed down, relaxing into the kiss and eagerly returning it, wrapping her arms around his neck. They only broke apart when they heard a whoop of approval coming from Ashido in the common room, reminding them that they had an audience. Hatsume stepped back, her cheeks bright red. She pushed a lock of hair behind an ear and looked shyly up at Midoriya. Midoriya was also blushing, but he was smiling. "Merry Christmas, Hatsume." Hatsume returned the smile and nodded. She walked through the door to leave. She stopped before the door closed and turned back. "You can call me Mei." Midoriya nodded. "And you can call me Izuku, Mei." That did it. Hatsume hid her face in her hands, giggling loudly, before she turned away and ran down the steps back towards her dorm. This has been Handmade Christmas Gifts by Dr. Emmett Brown, read to you by the author. If you like what you've heard today, then please like and subscribe to my channel. If it gets enough likes, I have a few more stories I'd like to read to you as well. If you'd like to read more of my stories, you can follow the links in the description to my profile on Archive of Our Own or fanfiction.net. Goodbye.